Hi, I'm Kevin Woodson, and my recently released book is The Black Ceiling: How Race Still Matters in the Elite Workplace, and it was released by the University of Chicago Press in November of 2023. My book is titled to convey the sense that within many of these high-status careers, there comes a point where the representation of black workers just seems to plummet. So at law firms, for example, at the largest and most elite law firms in the country, you see they do a really good job of recruiting and hiring representative numbers of young black associates. But by the time these attorneys are eligible to go up for partner, most of these black associates are long gone. Very, very few end up making it to partner. And so the black ceiling terminology from the title, which I can't take credit for, it was actually from the University of Chicago Press has people who suggested this title. It really captures that idea that there comes a point where this upward advancement just really stops. And one thing I want to make clear about the title, though, is it's potentially misleading. If you don't read the book, if you just see the title, you might assume it means that everything's going well until these black professionals reach a high level of their career, and then all of a sudden they face these problems or they run into obstacles that are insurmountable. But in truth, the black ceiling is really the culmination of years of difficulties and disadvantages that affect them from day one in some instances, all the way until the end of their careers at these firms. The book focuses on the personal and professional experiences of 110 black professionals who've worked at some of the most prestigious law firms, investment banks, and management consulting firms in the country. It includes both the frustrations of some of the interviewees who had the most challenging experiences, and it also shares some reflections from interviewees who were more satisfied with their careers or who achieved greater successes at their firms. And I think these interview excerpts are very important because it demonstrates that these aren't just the musings of some academic who's in the ivory tower and theorizing about what's going on in the workplace. These theories and claims that I develop in this book really come directly from the experiences of the people that I interview. And because I had the benefit of talking to well over 100 people, I was able to see patterns and common themes emerge, and that enabled me to develop the theories. But I think it's just really important that when people read this book, they actually hear from the people themselves who've been in these situations and who've experienced these challenges. It was a very solitary process in many ways, in the sense that I had to go through my interview data by myself. We're not allowed to share this kind of confidential information with a lot of other people, and really look for the connections and think through what the data demonstrated, and then try to write it up. So this book has had a very interesting and long journey. It began many years ago when, as a graduate student, I needed to take care of a seminar paper requirement, and I decided to interview 20 black professionals to complete a 25 to 30 page paper. It went very well, and my advisor at the time pushed me to expand it further and to make it a dissertation. So this became my dissertation, so the focal point of my grad school career. And I interviewed, in total, 150 or so people. And using this research, I wrote a number of law review articles that focused on different aspects of their experiences. And as I forged forward in my career, I continued to work on this on the side. And many years later, I finally completed the manuscript and sent it to the University of Chicago Press, and it was accepted for publication, and here we are. Over the course of working on this book, I received a tremendous amount of guidance and feedback from colleagues, friends, and other acquaintances who were familiar with the subject matter, and it proved to be really indispensable for the final product. There were times where I had a kind of narrow focus on a topic that I found interesting, that other people pointed out perhaps wasn't the most important part of my research. And in presenting this research to many different faculties at different law schools and in other academic departments, I was able to see which ideas really resonated with people and which ideas I needed to rethink and clarify. And finally, just in speaking with a lot of friends of mine who are practicing attorneys or who work on Wall Street, and talking to them about my ideas and theories and hearing them react and compare it to their experiences and observations in the workplace, that was tremendously helpful as well. Because it really helped me figure out which ideas could have the biggest impact in reaching people, both in terms of people who've already experienced this and who can attest to some of the problems that I discuss in the book, but also to inform other people who weren't really aware of all of these challenges that I discuss. Part of the reason why this book took me such a long time to finish is because, of course, I was juggling it with other responsibilities, other academic projects, teaching courses that in some instances were on very different subjects. And that creates a situation where you have to find ways to juggle and manage your time, not unlike those that our students will experience when they're practicing attorneys as well. But I benefited from being able to allot specific chunks of time each day toward this project. I found that that approach really enabled me to make far greater progress in a quicker period of time than when I had left it up to chance. So in other words, there were different points in my career where I had different philosophies about how and when I would work on this book. And what really got me over the finish line was finding a way to just make the time for the book no matter what. So there were a few months in particular, back in 2022 actually, where I was able to just accomplish an extraordinary amount of the book's progress after having other years go by where I accomplished far less than that. So progress is not always linear, and your approach to these types of projects can make a very big difference. The topic of this book, which of course is about diversity, equity, and inclusion at elite law firms and other professional services firms, dovetailed nicely with one of the courses that I teach here. There's a seminar that I created on diversity in education and employment, and that seminar covers a lot of the same themes of the book. So I actually assign a related law review article in that course that I wrote several years ago, and we talk about some of the issues, including the challenges that Black attorneys and attorneys from other underrepresented groups experience in certain organizations, and some of the potential solutions. So a challenge that I faced with this book was actually not in doing the research and not in doing the writing per se, but in just organizing it and in thinking about how to present the research to readers. That was something that I failed to anticipate would take a lot more time and a lot more trial and error than I had expected. I really had a difficult time figuring out what my chapters should be. So in other words, you can see a book on a shelf and it might all look like it comes together cleanly. I hope my book comes across that way. But it's a really difficult process sometimes figuring out which chapters that you think you want to write end up not making sense, what other chapters you might need to add just so that everything else connects and flows and makes sense. Even a relatively short book, there's just so much work behind the scenes over the years that goes into it. So some of my favorite books are actually books by academics who are writing about these topics. There's Elliot Curry wrote a book called Peculiar Indifference that's about the homicide crisis affecting many Black Americans. That book really resonated with me and I really enjoyed it. Thomas Abt, ABT, has a similar book, Bleeding Out. But I also listen to and read self-help books. So James Clear has this book, Atomic Habits, that I thought was pretty amazing. And every now and then I listen to fiction. I can't remember the last time that I actually sat down with a hard copy of a novel, but I certainly listen to fiction on Audible. And a couple of great ones that I've listened to relatively recently are Americana. I thought that was an amazing novel. And on a lighter note, Cotton Comes to Harlem. That's an old, sort of profane but hilarious novel from the author Chester Himes. I've also listened on Audible to books relating to the OxyContin crisis. That's something that some of our students know I worked on back many, many moons ago when I was an attorney. So there are a couple of books, Dreamland and Empire of Pain, that both do a great job explaining some of what went on. And there's some amazing investigative journalism involved, and I just enjoyed both of those books. If I were going to try to sell this book to our students or other members of our community, I guess I would make clear that this is a book that is going to be helpful for people as they pursue their professional careers. Even if they're not Black professionals, there are important lessons, I think, that are going to help people understand how these firms and other workplace organizations work, what it takes to get ahead, what are some of the problems and challenges that lead to unmeritocratic outcomes. And so I think anyone can benefit from learning some of the lessons of this book about how much relationships matter, the role of discretion and subjectivity in shaping careers. And I think it's especially important for people who are from underrepresented or disadvantaged groups in these settings, because some of the challenges that I document in this book are going to be especially applicable for many of them. And so I think that it's valuable if people at least have their eyes open to some of these potential challenges, so that if and when they encounter them, they'll be better situated to either handle them or avoid them. And finally, I think this book is even more important, perhaps, for people who want to be allies, or for employers who want to do the right thing, who want to run their firms the right way, and who want to ensure that workers of all backgrounds and characteristics are included and treated equitably. I think that making themselves aware of some of the challenges that I discuss in this book is a critical first step to disrupting some of these problems that have been going on for a very long time, and possibly to achieving a more equitable future for their firms.